Hello YouTube, how are you? My name's Jude and welcome back to my channel. Today we'll be doing my full card predictions for UFC Vegas 119, Kape versus Horiguchi 2. Before we get into that, we'll just briefly talk about UFC Freedom 250. I started the card 5 for 5 and then I did end up switching my my pick to Alex Pereira against Cyril Gane, and that one didn't go my way. And then the Ilia Topuria one didn't go my way either. So we started 5 for 5, and then we ended up 5 for 7. And now we're on a 2-fight losing streak for main events. So hopefully this week we can get back in the win column with main events. But I'm honestly not too sure. I can see this main event going a lot of different ways. But before we get into that, we have to talk about all the other fights first. So I'm excited for this card. I think this is a pretty solid Apex card. Really solid main event here, and some good fights on the undercard as well. But to open up the first two fights of the night, we have UFC Debutant versus UFC Debutant. So our first fight of the night is Shane Collins versus Otari Tanzalovi, and I haven't been able to watch too much tape for this card. So I definitely will in the coming days. This video is going to come out a little later in the week because I didn't get back in town until very late on Sunday night, and then I worked yesterday, and then today I worked as well, and took a nap after work, and then hung out with my friends. So this one's coming out late, very early Wednesday morning, I guess. But we have Shane Collins versus Otari Tanzalovi. What I've seen on tape from Shane Collins in the limited amount that I've watched, he's looked really good. He's looked well-rounded. A lot of power on the feet. Pretty dynamic fighter overall. I like what I've seen from Shane Collins. Then on the other side, we have Otari Tanzalovi. And I've only seen Otari Tanzalovi's two most recent fights, but I remember watching him versus Josias Musasa on the Contender Series, and Josias Musasa was able to outwork him and fend off a lot of the takedowns that Tanzalovi was going for in this fight. So I just am not really impressed with Otari Tanzalovi, even though he's been fighting better level of competition on the regional scene than Shane Collins. I like what I've seen in the eye test from Shane Collins, so I'm going to be picking Shane Collins to win this one by unanimous decision. Next fight on the card, we have Leon Shabazian versus Levon Chokeli. I'm not sure if that's how you say it, but I'm pretty sure it is. It might be Chokeli, but I'll just call him Levon. So yeah, we have Leon Shabazian versus Levon, and Leon Shabazian, obviously brother of Edmund Shabazian. He's actually his older brother. And then Levon Chokeli is a guy that's been fighting in Bellator and then went back on the regional scene, got a win, and now he is making his UFC debut here. Leon Shabazian was also on the Contender Series, but his was about 7 years ago, I think now, when he lost to Phil Rowe, got finished by Phil Rowe in the third round, and I just really don't like what I've seen from Leon Shabazian on the feet. He's on a nice little 4-fight win streak here, but his most recent loss was against Ryan Loder in a fight where he kind of got dominated. And then Levon Chokeli's most recent loss was to Lorenz Larkin, but I think the same thing would happen if Leon Shabazian fought Lorenz Larkin. I just think Levon is much, much better on the feet than Leon Shabazian, and Shabazian's path to victory here is he needs a submission, and I think Levon Chokeli is a good enough wrestler to not get taken down by Leon Shabazian. So as long as he stays safe and doesn't do anything stupid, I think Levon wins this one pretty comfortably, and I'm gonna pick Levon to get a knockout. Honestly, probably round 1 or 2, but we're gonna tentatively say round 1. Next fight on the card, we have a ranked matchup at women's bantamweight between Carol Hosa and Luana Santos, and I think this is actually going to be a pretty competitive, close fight. Luana Santos has a pretty good record in the UFC, with her one loss being to Casey O'Neill. Since then, she got a nice submission over Lisboa, and pretty solid performance here against Melissa Croden. Carol Rosa, on the other hand, win one, lose one type of fighter. Um, has some has some good wins on her record, much better level of competition than Luana Santos, and she's not that old either. Um, she lost to Aylin Perez, she lost to Irene Aldana, and Carol Rosa's weakness is kind of in the grappling. I I think Carol Rosa is going to be better on the feet, but Luana Santos, I see her holding her own, and then I think if she's able to get Carol Rosa down, she'll be able to control her well. Luana Santos, pretty talented on the ground. Um, I'm just leaning towards Luana Santos here, but I can see this being a very, very close fight, and I can see it going the other direction. But I am leaning towards Luana Santos by decision. All right, our next prelim, we have Michael Aswell versus Gaston Bolaños, and um, I have a couple things to say about Gaston Bolaños. A little bit of a rant to go on here, and it doesn't really matter, but I just I don't really understand how Gaston Bolaños is still in the UFC. Um, his only wins in the UFC, he's I think 2-2 in the UFC, but he beat Aaron Phillips, and then Marcus McGee kind of killed him. And then he got a win over Cortavius Romeus, who should have never been in the UFC either. Cortavius Romeus fought a guy on the Contender Series who was like 34. Didn't even have a great performance against him. Cortavius Romeus went winless in the UFC. And then in his most recent fight, he got submitted by Quang Lee. And Quang Lee got cut from the UFC after losing to Santiago Luna, but Gaston Bolaños is still around. Um, I don't really like when the UFC does stuff like that, when they punish fighters for being active. Um, I think Quang Lee deserves another shot in the UFC. I really like Quang Lee. But tangent over. Um, Stupid tangent, by the way. Um, I like Michael Aswell here. I think Michael Aswell is a pretty bad matchup for Gaston Bolaños. Um, he's going to be a better grappler than Gaston Bolaños, even though Michael Aswell doesn't use it a lot. You go look at his tape, you don't really see him grapple a lot, but I'm confident he'll still be the better grappler than Gaston Bolaños. And then in terms of straight punches and boxing, I think Michael Aswell's better, but when it comes to the kicks, that's where the danger is with Gaston Bolaños. Um, I'm just pretty confident that Michael Aswell will be able to outstrike Gaston Bolaños and just out gameplay Gaston Bolaños. So I'm going to pick Michael Aswell to win this one by pretty convincing decision. All right, next fight on the card. This is one that I have actually gone back and forth with a lot. We have Alan Nascimento versus Mitch Raposo, and I broke this fight down for UFC Winnipeg, and I was originally going to pick Alan Nascimento. That's who I picked then. And the more I think about it, the less confident I am in Alan Nascimento. I think obviously Alan Nascimento has much better ground game and jiu-jitsu, but Alan Nascimento's wrestling is not very good, and Mitch Raposo's wrestling is actually pretty good. Um, I think Mitch is a better boxer. Alan Nascimento is better with the kicks than anything, but his hands aren't very good. He's a bit slow, a bit stiff on the feet. Um, but yeah, if Alan Nascimento is not able to get this fight to the ground, I think he'll struggle a lot here. I don't really like Mitch Raposo. I don't rate him super highly at flyweight. Um, I'm honestly not really sure on this one. I don't like how low output Mitch Raposo is. Um, got a win over his at Maxim in his last one, but pretty close fight there besides the point deduction, I thought. And besides that, lost to Andre Lima, lost to Suma Derji, lost to Jake Hadley on the Contender Series, got submitted by Hadley. Um, I really don't know on this one. I'm still going to slightly lean towards Alon Nascimento because he has higher level wins. He's going to be a much bigger flyweight in there, much longer reach, much taller, about 3 inches taller, and then a 5 inch reach advantage. I'm going to lean towards Alon Nascimento to win this one by decision. Alright, our next fight on the card, we have Bia Mesquita versus Melissa Mullins. And I think this one's pretty fairly straightforward. Um, Melissa Mullins is alright, but she's lost in the UFC to Nora Cornell, and then more recently in a rematch with Daria Zelezniakova where she had an awful game plan and decided to strike with Bia Mesquita. I think this one's pretty even on the feet. Melissa Mullins may have a slight advantage on the feet, but I don't even think that's the case. Um, Probably a power disadvantage here, and the clearest ground disadvantage that you can probably imagine. So I'm going to pick Bia Mesquita to win this one by round one submission. I kind of think she'll just run right through Melissa Mullins. All right, we've reached the main card. So now we have Vinicius Oliveira versus Andre Fili. And Fili's been looking better. I think Fili has honestly been looking better more recently. Um, Pretty much since the Danny Gay fight where he got folded. But close fight with Cub Swanson here. It's a solid win, even though Cub Swanson's old. He still went out competitive. He still went out winning. Then he lost to Melquizael Costa in a fight where he just had lapse in judgment, stuck his head into a guillotine. Since then, he was able to beat Christian Rodriguez. I thought this one was pretty clear. Close fight, but I thought Andre Fili won 2 rounds out of it against Christian Rodriguez. Christian Rodriguez is fighting later on the card, even though Andre Fili beat him, which is a bit strange. And then most recently, a competitive fight with Jose Delgado that I do think Jose Delgado won, but it was much closer than I thought it would be. And then we have Vinicius Oliveira, who's moving up to featherweight. This was originally supposed to be Oliveira versus Chikadze, and then Giga Chikadze withdrew from this fight. I don't know if there's been an official reason announced, but yeah. And then Andre Fili stepping in on short notice here to welcome Vinicius Oliveira to 145. Vinicius Oliveira went on a pretty solid run at bantamweight. Wins over Bernardo Sopai, Ricky Simone, Said Nurmagomedov, and Kyler Phillips. Surprisingly, he hasn't found many finishes in the UFC. Just the one against Sopai in his debut. And then main event here against Mario Batista. It didn't look like he had more than 1 round of cardio, really, and just kind of got dominated a little bit by Mario Batista. I don't really know. I don't think that Vinicius Oliveira is going to be able to finish Andre Fili. It's possible. Like, Fili's been finished before on the feet. The most recent one I can think of, well, it's Danny Gay, but before that, Joe Anderson Brito. And Vinicius Oliveira does have power, but he hasn't been able to put away Simone, Nurmagomedov, or Kyler Phillips, despite hurting those guys. I don't know. I really don't know in this one. I don't really want to pick Andre Fili, but I do think that there's a very solid chance that Andre Fili is able to have a crafty performance here and get it done. But I think I'm just going to pick Vinicius Oliveira to win this fight by decision. Yeah, maybe a late. No, I don't. I think if the KO happens, it's going to be pretty early, honestly. Um, we're going to say Oliveira gets it done by round 2 finish. I don't know why I did all that talking just to change my mind at the end, but we made it. Now we have Melsik Bagdasaryan versus Murtazali Magomedov. This is Magomedov's UFC debut after an impressive win on Dana White's Contender Series last season. Um, Melsik Bagdasaryan has been a very inactive fighter in his UFC career, but he's 3-2. None of the guys that he has beaten are still signed with a promotion. Win here over Colin Anglin. I hadn't even heard this name until I was looking at Melsik Bagdasaryan's record. Win over Bruno Souza. Loss by submission to Josh Kalibau. Win over Tucker Lutz, and then lost to Gene Silva. But pretty inactive fighter. On average, he fights once a year. Pretty solid kickboxer is Melsik Bagdasaryan, but he's lacking on the ground. We'll say if he got submitted by Joshua Kalibau, I kind of see Magomedov being able to do the same thing. Magomedov, I think, has 5 wins by knockout and 5 wins by submission, so pretty even. But I think the clear path to victory here, and the path of least resistance, is going to be to take Melsik Bagdasaryan down. So I'm going to be picking Magomedov to win this fight by submission, probably in round 1. Next fight on the card, we have Andre Lima versus Kevin Borjas. And I know, Artem, if you're watching this, I know how bad you think Kevin Borjas is. I don't think he's that bad, but he's pretty bad. Like, I see what you're saying. Borjas 1-4 in the UFC. His win over Ronaldo Rodriguez. It was actually the only fight that I got wrong on this entire Mexico card. But yeah, he was able to beat Ronaldo Rodriguez there. Lost his debut to Joshua Van in a fight where he hurt Van. Lost to Alessandro Costa, lost to Sumaderji, and most recently lost to Imanol Rodriguez after almost putting him away early. Kevin Borjas does have some power. He's a decent boxer. Just hasn't really been able to put anything together in the UFC. And I think there's something that the UFC could have easily done on this card. We have Andre Lima fighting Kevin Borjas and Alan Nascimento fighting Mitch Raposo. I think it would have made more sense to do Lima versus Nascimento and Borjas versus Raposo, but it's whatever. I think that's a more winnable matchup for Kevin Borjas. But yeah, with all that being said, I'm going to pick Andre Lima to win this fight by decision against Kevin Borjas. I could see it getting scrappy in moments, but I think Andre Lima is just a cleaner kickboxer, and he's a well-rounded fighter too. All right, our featured fight on the card, we have Christian Rodriguez versus Haider Emil. And this is a very rare matchup in the UFC where I do not like either guy. I've never liked Christian Rodriguez very much. Honestly, I think he's just an undisciplined bantamweight. Missed weight a couple times at bantamweight, but he doesn't look like a featherweight in there. He's 5'7", and he doesn't have any sort of abs or anything. So I do think his natural weight class is probably 135, but he's moved up to featherweight and had pretty limited success since doing so. Lost to Julian Erosa here, getting submitted by Julian Erosa. Not a great look. Like, Erosa has a good guillotine, but really not a good look there. And then got a win over Austin Bashi in a very competitive fight, which is a good win. And then a loss to Melquiades Costa in a fight where he had some success. And then most recently, that split decision loss to Andre Fili that we talked about earlier. And then Haider Emil came into the UFC as a decent prospect, albeit a little old. Got a win on the Contender Series, if I'm not mistaken, and then beat Fernie Garcia, beat Jiang Young Lee, and then had a very close fight, competitive fight with William Gomez that he was given the split decision win, and then he got finished by Jose Delgado in about 30 seconds, and then this fight with Jamal Emmers just out-wrestled him, and honestly just kind of outclassed him. I think Emmers looked better on the feet. Emmers looked much better on the ground, and Emil's cardio looked like a bit of an issue. I think Christian Rodriguez is kind of due for a win here. Both guys are on 2-fight losing streaks, and they put this all the way up in the featured fight. When Fili versus Oliveira is a much better fight to me. A bit strange there. The UFC's been doing some weird things with who they put on the cards and how they matchmake in general. I'm going to lean Christian Rodriguez here, though, because I think he's a much better grappler than Haider Emil, and we learned in the Jamal Emmers fight that that is the path of least resistance when it comes to beating Haider Emil. So I think if Christian Rodriguez can follow a decent game plan and not get swarmed by Haider Emil, he's going to be able to get this one done. Low confidence pick there, I'm not going to lie. All right, we have our co-main event, which is going to be Navajo Sterling versus Iwan Cutelaba. And this is actually the fight that Navajo Sterling wanted. This is who he called out after his win over Bruno Lopez, his first knockout in the UFC. But Navajo Sterling won on the Contender Series and then has put 4 wins in a row in the UFC since, beating Tugo Tokos, Ivan Urslan, Rodolfo Bellato, and most recently Bruno Lopez. All of these guys are at a similar spot in the UFC light heavyweight rankings, or at least they were. In the case of Tokos and Urslan, I don't think either is signed anymore. Iwan Cutelaba, on the other hand, in his last 5 fights, lost to Felipe Lins, got a win over Ivan Urslan in a competitive fight, submitted Ibo Aslan here, and then lost a close fight to Modestas Bukauskas that I think he could have arguably won. And then after that, sort of fraud checked Umar Sy for the second time and out-grappled him and caught him in a guillotine. But I think Navajo is a much better striker here. And I'll just say I think Navajo Sterling is a better striker than Modestas Bukauskas, and Bukauskas was able to keep this one close. I think Navajo Sterling's takedown defense should hold up here as he trains out of City Kickboxing, and he's shown a solid takedown defense in the past. I think this is a pretty safe, as long as he has a solid game plan, as long as he doesn't do anything stupid, as long as he doesn't get caught, I think this is a pretty safe matchup for Navajo Sterling, albeit Cutelaba is very dangerous, and this could age very poorly if Cutelaba just club and subs him or whatever. But I think Navajo Sterling is a more technical fighter, and will be able to hold up in a 3-round fight, especially if he's able to keep this one on the feet for the majority of the fight. I think the longer this stays on the feet, the more of an advantage Navajo Sterling has, and I can honestly see him getting a late finish here against Iwan Cutelaba. So yeah, I think I am actually going to pick Sterling to get a round 3 KO here. And yeah. Alright, then we've got to our main event, which is Manel Kape versus Kyoji Horiguchi. The first fight took place in Ryzen about 10 years ago now. 9 or 10 years ago. Kyoji Horiguchi, obviously a former UFC title challenger, and that's actually his only loss in the UFC, was that title fight against Demetrius Johnson. But besides that, he is 9-1 in the UFC overall, recently re-signed, and has since dominated Tagir Ulanbekov, and then pretty clean win against Amir Albazi too most recently. And then on the other side, we have Manel Kape, who since his loss to Muhammad Makayev has put 3 in a row together, all by knockout. He was able to finish Bruno Silva in, I believe, round 3 of this fight. Able to do the same thing to Asu Almabayev. Bit of controversy in both of these fights, though. This one was kind of a groin strike TKO, and then this one was kind of an eye poke TKO. Still impressive wins, just not like a super impressive finishing sequence, if we're being honest. I don't know why I struggled with that so much. But most recently, he did have a pretty impressive finishing sequence against Brandon Royval in the last fight of the UFC ESPN era. And then, yeah, that's pretty much the most recent 5 for everybody. I don't know. I don't know why I'm struggling so bad this video. I just need to take a breath. I am a little worried here for Horiguchi. I think these are 2 of the fastest flyweights in the UFC. And this is a great fight. Like, this is a number one contender fight. I think the winner of this one should definitely get the next title shot after Pantoja and Van, or if Pantoja is going to be out for an even more extended period of time, just give whoever wins this one the next title shot. But I think this is a super competitive fight, and it's going to be a different fight than it was 10 years ago, obviously. Kape has a big reach advantage here. I think Kape has a clear power advantage, and he might even be the faster striker. But I'm struggling to see Horiguchi get knocked out here, especially in the same way that these 3 have. Royval wins, obviously very impressive. This is not a confident pick by any means. I just think Horiguchi might be able to make this one gritty, might be able to make this one ugly. Muhammad Mokaev was able to sort of neutralize Manel Kape, and I think Horiguchi is a better striker than Muhammad Mokaev, and I don't think the wrestling gap is huge. Obviously, Mokaev probably a better straight-up wrestler than Kyoji Horiguchi, but I like Horiguchi's wrestling, and I like his ground game a lot. I can see Horiguchi being able to get 3 rounds here. I could see Manel Kape putting him away, or I could see Manel Kape outpointing him, but I think Kyoji Horiguchi is going to be able to mix this one up enough, and I'm going to pick Horiguchi to win by decision. Close, competitive decision, but I think you'll find more and more grappling success as this fight goes on, and hopefully that's the game plan that he approaches this with, because if he just tries to strike with Manel Kape, I'm not sure how well it'll go for him as a 35-year-old flyweight. But I like Horiguchi here, and I'm finding it hard to pick against him after his 2 most recent performances. So that'll be my video for today. I'm just going to go through my quick picks very briefly and tell you about my level of confidence. Hopefully it saved. Yeah, it did. Okay. We have Shane Collins with low confidence because this is debut versus debut. We have Levancho Kelly with medium confidence because I don't rate Leon Shabazian. We have Luana Santos with low confidence. Michael Aswell with medium to high confidence. I don't really rate Bolaños. Nascimento with low confidence. I could see myself switching this to Raposo. I've been battling with this one a lot, and we'll definitely revisit the tape. Then we have Bia Mosquito with high confidence. Vinicius Oliveira, honestly, low to medium confidence here. I could see Andre Fili putting a crafty performance together. And I could see the argument for Fili for sure. Pretty high confidence in Murtazali Magomedov here, even though it's his debut. I think Melsik Bagdasaryan's a very favorable matchup for him. Then we have Andre Lima with high confidence against Kevin Borjas. And Christian Rodriguez with low confidence against Haider Emil. Navajo Sterling with medium confidence against Iwan Kutalaba. And then, honestly, kind of a coin flip for me in the main event between Manel Kape and Kyoji Horiguchi. I am just right now leaning towards Kyoji Horiguchi. So, thank you for all the support. Thank you for watching my videos. Please consider subscribing if you enjoy my videos and you're not subscribed. And yeah, I appreciate any likes, any comments, any sort of engagement in general with my channel. I really appreciate. So, thank you guys, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.